Welcome to our 54th podcast. Today we'll be talking about harnessing the power of micro changes. What's the one thing you can do now to make small changes that have a big effect? Keep listening to find out. Welcome to Harmonious Workplaces, a podcast about corporate culture, organizational change management, and workplace behavior. Harmonious Workplaces was started by independent consultants Rich Cruz, Ben Kleinman, and Cheryl Volpe to explore, challenge, and build on various organizational culture and change management concepts. It's a blend of theory and practice based on their personal and professional experiences working with companies of all sizes across various industries. If you own a business, lead a team, want new ideas about the corporate environment, or just want to listen to a group of consultants talking about how to make work more enjoyable, we invite you to sit back, relax, and dive in with us to Harmonious Workplaces. Hello, Harmonious Workplaces listeners. As always, we're so glad to have you here. I'm Rich Cruz, an organizational development consultant, and I am joined with my co-host, Cheryl Volpe. Hi, Cheryl.
Hi, Rich. Hi, everyone.
And Ben Kleinman.
Hey, everyone.
And today we are going to be talking about the little changes, right? These little micro changes. And so we're always talking about, making change your friend. But we also have talked about how, that can be fatiguing, how these big changes can be, just culture altering things, right? But how can we make the most out of the little changes that happen? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's in part little changes, and it's in part a little bit of some of the things that we've just learned over the years from investigations into behavioral economics and behavioral psychology and social psychology, just about how to make the desired behavior, the default behavior, make it easier for people to understand what a change is in a very tactile way, make it easier for people to just do one simple thing. And like you're saying, kind of build some of those habits that over time will lead to this massive transformation that you're trying to get people to. And so it's a way of sort of, in some ways, shrinking, but also making it easier for people to do the right thing or the desired thing in ways that don't feel like they're so overwhelming or so egregious. Like if I told my daughter to go clean her room, she would just like stare at me like, "What? This does not compute." But if I said, "Can you just pick your socks up off the floor?" Oh yeah, she can do that, no problem at all, right? So it's just little things, and we're still getting beyond the socks. But at some point, we'll get to a slightly cleaner patch of floor.
Right. And I'm glad that it's not my kids that were.
And in a way, it's just repackaging a lot of the things that we've talked about on other episodes, right? It's that whole various steps you can take, everything from psychological safety to signaling to just, finding cohorts within smaller groups, just on a very intentional, to use a word that you like to use, Ben, that intentionally reframing these bigger concepts in bite-sized nuggets.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. For sure. And I love that, you're thinking about stuff that we've been talking about many times. And it still all comes back to some of those foundational principles. You have to understand why you're doing something, and you have to make that why really understandable and resonant with the people that you're working with. And they have to feel like they're in a place where they can try something and fail and not get punished, or they can suggest an idea and maybe it goes somewhere, maybe it doesn't, but they can feel like they can suggest that idea and be supported in giving it a try, or hearing why maybe it isn't right or isn't right now. And so it's all of these things coming together. This is just like a nice example of ways that you can sometimes take some of those and just make it, without it being this grand, 17-year vision of taking over the world. It's just a little thing that we can do right now, or a little change that we can implement across the company that will make it much easier for people to X, Y, or Z. And so we can get into examples of all that and stuff, but yeah, it's very true.
If I could, one of the things that comes to mind for me is learning like a musical instrument, where,
Mm.
if you try to play a full piece right off the bat, like you've never touched this thing before, right? You're gonna get disappointed and you're gonna put it down. And so many people are like that, right? They just, I want to play these three chords, or I want to, I want to play my favorite song, and I can't, play this guitar piece, or I can't play
I
the
want to
drums
rock.
this way. I want to rock, like and I want it instantly, right? And when they don't do that, they get disappointed. And but if you can, good teachers will like incrementally build in small successes, right? Hey, I can play hot cross buns, three notes, right? So I'm now can even just getting that first note to be nice and clean is a step forward, where now I want to learn the next thing, and incrementally you can build on that until you're you're cooking, you know. Um, and I so if we're doing that, and so many people take, sports are like that, you know.
Hmm.
You start small with the basics, the fundamentals, and you build on that. Why can't we do that in the workplace? I
I
don't
was
know.
just going to say that's so interesting because I feel like with music or with sports, I don't think anyone goes onto the pitcher's mound and assumes that they're going to throw a 90-mile-per-hour fastball perfectly down the middle. Or
Right.
I don't think anyone picks up a basketball and assumes that they're going to drill a three-pointer the first time they touch a basketball. And yet, in the corporate world, it seems very different.
Right.
All of a sudden, you get someone in a position and they think, well, this is just easy and I should be able to do this right away. Or
Sure.
leadership assumes that we're rolling out a new system, or we've got these new processes in place. It should be easy peasy for people to just pick this up out of nowhere and become
Hmm.
experts in it. And
Sure.
there's not this sense of no, no, no. Maybe it's easy for you because you've been thinking about it for 2 years, but it's something that these people are just seeing for the first time.
Hmm.
So yeah,
And that all goes back to culture, right?
yeah.
Because, I mean, you have some cultures where if the leaders don't have this enormous gravitas, right, and hubris walking into a room, then if the teams are already in a bad place or the culture is already rife with undercurrents of dissatisfaction, that leader will not have the influence or the power to move things forward or fix it. So it's that dance between how vulnerable can you be about what you don't know
Sure.
in the goals that the company has set, right?
Sure.
And even this is a very effective example of micro changes, right? Because in a learning culture, you can institute micro changes that are welcomed and do suggest that people need to get better at something. They don't walk in the door already having those skills.
That's right.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
And it can be super easy stuff. And I'm thinking about a recent guest we had, Alex Prasis, who had suggested that micro changes can be so useful for building trust or rebuilding trust in situations where it has gone sideways. And it can be something as simple as just remembering someone's name or asking them how their daughter did at a science fair over the weekend or something like that. How was their vacation? I mean, it's just little things that show you care about that person and recognize that person as an individual. So those are just, brilliant ideas that she has.
Sure. Sure. And that goes very much aligned. It aligns with there are several different sales philosophies that are out there. But a lot of they boil down to, people do business with the people they know, like, and trust, right? And so when you have somebody who goes in for the ask immediately, like, I can help you with this, this, and this, and here's my offer, right? That rarely works. But when you develop a relationship, and it's incremental touches to the person, right? And how can I help you? And you're building a relationship with somebody, that those it's those little things that build up to a point where you're actually starting to be able to talk about solutions.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
And that direct approach can work if you already have that relationship built up.
Sure, sure. But without that,
Oh yeah, without
without
that, it's really
any
hard.
sense of that, right? And but it takes getting to know that person, and then that person getting to know you, and at some point that'll crystallize into an opportunity, maybe. you know
Yeah.
but you've got to build it little by little.
I'm wondering if maybe we take a little break and then when we
Sure.
come back, we can talk about some of the theoretical frameworks behind all of this micro change
Yeah,
stuff. And I know
sure.
that's Rich's jam. And then maybe we can talk about how this works and why motivation, intrinsic motivation, is so critical, which is kind of somewhere that I've been exploring a bit. And then maybe we can also talk about where micro changes are not going to work so well.
Mm, okay, I like it.
Sounds great.
Very good. Okay, we'll be right
Stay
back.
tuned. All in the next 20 minutes. Jam packed episode.
Woo,
Go tell your
that's a
friends now.
lot to promise.
It's quite a little.
Uh,
Okay. Um,
they'll be right back. I'll be fired.
Dysfunctional organizational cultures and poorly managed transformations can devastate employee morale and motivation, leading to disengaged employees, poor work quality, and the loss of your best people. The impacts to your organization include high costs, low productivity, and wasted resources. At Harmonious Workplaces, our purpose is to help you build the best workplace possible. We are advisors applying proven organizational development and industrial organizational psychology methodologies to help you become your best organization. We are doers, using time-tested principles to help you execute organizational change initiatives smoothly and successfully. To discover how Harmonious Workplaces can impact your organization, visit www.harmoniousworkplaces.com and book a free 30-minute information session with one of our consultants today. Again, that's www.harmoniousworkplaces.com. And we're back. So we're talking about building on the small changes, in organizational change. And so Ben teed it up with, we're going to talk a little bit about theory and some other stuff, as we go through the rest of this episode. You put a whole lot of pressure on us to get a lot of stuff done in like 20 minutes, man. But
We're going to show you, teach you, and then make it happen.
There
We
you
have
go.
plenty of time.
there
Plenty
you
of time.
go.
Well, I think one of the things maybe that would be helpful would be to just give a little bit of background in terms of the theories that this is emerging from.
Sure.
So it's not like we're making this up completely, and it's
Absolutely.
stuff that at least in my work with clients I've seen be very helpful, and it's grown out of a lot of literature and research and things like that. And so some of the things where at least I've drawn from Rich Thaler and Cass Sunstein nudge theory, and this is going back probably 20 years now.
Mm,
This whole idea of reducing friction and making the desired action the default. And so one of their classic experiments was around opting out of a contribution plan for retirement benefits instead of opting in. So they made it default that everyone in a company would automatically contribute some nominal amount, and then they saw participation in retirement plans just skyrocket because people,
mm,
it's one of those just set it and forget it kind of things. And so it was
sure.
beneficial for the employees. They were contributing, they were getting the corporate match, and they were having a slightly more effective retirement plan set up for them. So it was a classic example of how the default can be made the easy path in in a corporate setting. I think where sometimes that goes a little bit awry is when it feels a little bit too manipulative, or when it feels like you don't necessarily have the best interests of everyone at heart. It's a little bit overbearing. So there was a study I was seeing where Google had changed the position of foods in their cafeteria and elevated water to be at eye level and soda and junk food to be at a much lower level or a much higher level. So people would
Sure.
automatically see the water or the healthy snacks and go for that as their default. And I think people kind of resented that. So maybe developers, the lesson there maybe is, Google developers are an independent breed and like their junk food and soda. I don't know, but it just seems like you have to balance the parentalism with the default. And um, so that was one theory.
That
Another
makes
one
sense.
that I've liked to use, and then I'll shut up for a minute, is some work by Chip and Dan Heath. These are two brothers. They've written a bunch of good books about change and um, sort of moments that matter is one of their books. Switch is another one of their books. Making Change Stick or Made to Stick is one of their books. Really good stuff. And in the book Switch, they talk about this idea of shrinking the change and then tweaking the environment. So, like we were just talking about in the first part of the show, you have these changes that instead of this like go tackle the world, become number one in your business in your industry, make it really small and very achievable, and then make
Sure.
environments such that you're almost guaranteed to succeed, right? So it's like very, very easy to do the right thing. So they've got some really good ideas about that, about making the changes smaller and easier to understand. Those are things that I've seen and drawn from. I'm
Sure.
curious what's resonated for you all.
I just want to say quickly, Rob Snyder, one of our guests in the past, talks about that frictionless, easy access. What is the lowest entry point
Hmm.
to a change or an initiative? And start with that
Hmm.
to promote success other than, which is the opposite of a concept I just read about that many, many people know about called eat the frog
Eat the frog. Yep.
first, right? We've talked about this before. That's get the hardest part over with first.
Right.
But even that gets broken down into, all right, if I'm going to eat the frog, write the book, for as an example.
Hmm.
What is the easiest first step I can take? And that, to go with the book writing, would be write 300 words in one day, right? That
Right.
small easy step,
All
the
right, you're going to
friction.
say start with the legs. They're a little
Start
less
with the legs.
gooey.
Yeah, there's all different ways to do that, absolutely. Or the eyes. I mean, they're
Oh,
super small.
Put a lot of good sauce on it. Garlic and butter, everything, right?
Absolutely. But writing those first 300 words, to your point, Rich.
yeah.
What were you going to say, though, Rich? You had an example or an idea that plugged into some of the stuff that Ben put out?
Well, no, I mean, coming from like some change models like Cotter's 8 steps, which we've talked about, right? Um, there's generate the short-term wins and then
Mhm.
sustain the acceleration. So, that has made its way into several other change models too. Of from an evidence-based standpoint, um, we see that you know setting short-term goals, right? Even I've brought up we've brought up several times like lock and lay them, have goal setting theory where you set goals and those need to be challenging, smart, specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time constrained goals, right? And as you attain these challenging goals, you are motivated to continue to increase that level of intensity, right? I mean, we see that with, again, going back to like sports and bodybuilding and that type of stuff, right? We add more weight to to train and get there, right? And
Hmm.
continue to challenge ourselves, right? Can I get a little faster? Going back to our last episode on gamification, if you can actually sometimes trend that over time, like building on those little incremental wins. So
Hmm.
there's certainly plenty of theory behind that. And then I
Yeah.
started rereading the Kuz and Posner the Leadership Challenge, which is a book that has now in its 8th edition. So there's a post-COVID edition now, which I that's why I picked it up again, because it's after the pandemic, right? And they talk a lot about that too, right? Celebrating these short-term wins and setting up learning cultures where people are picking up new skills, and you're not expecting them to get everything right the first time. So going back to our talk about psychological safety, you you need to have some tolerance to people developing those skills and leading up to where they're performing. So just a lot of theories out there that have evidence that says, hey, this is the way that you can have effective change.
Yeah. And performance, you are making me think about a public change that Microsoft underwent just last year, at the end of last year. And it was the idea that instead of waiting for the performance review that only comes once a year, that everybody dreads and everybody just kind of drags themselves through, and then you get this like good news and then bad news that you weren't expecting. They've abandoned that annual performance review check, and they do a constant loop of feedback. And this was in order for them to keep up with how things are changing so quickly in the world of technology, staying adaptable. It was an outward signaling that they were attempting to be more nimble with their performance, especially for the underperforming employees, having a constant feedback loop in the form of journal writing, which you had to do every day, and you could share at your discretion with your manager. It wasn't required, but it was required to write it every day, but it's not required to share it
Sure.
every day. But having frequent and shorter conversations with your manager, but so that when these performance notes were given to you, it wasn't all at once, and it wasn't as big a deal, because it was throughout the year you were getting notes and feedback for improvement. So that's an example of a large company that we all know that put this into action with the micro change.
Yeah, yeah. I appreciate that, because I've actually done that with several companies I've worked for as a consultant, where I'll um, I'll have the team put together a like an executive summary that will be kept in a shared drive, or some repository, right, where they can fetch the information at any time. And it's interesting to see, especially on a project, right, the documentation of where we were to where we're at, and you see this um, in the beginning. You'll see a whole lot of detail and a whole lot of things that are wrong, and like an issues log and all that stuff. But towards the end, you see that kind of diminishing, and you see where
Ideally,
well, ideally, yes, exactly, right. I mean, it's
not
not
getting
always that
longer.
way. Yes, there could be that. There could be that. But if you are building on those small successes, though, and you are trending towards success, you those reports can sometimes be as short as, we we hit our goal, right, and we don't have all these other things that are getting in the way, because the self-confidence, the self-efficacy, as you're going through and learning new things and building on things, that self-confidence goes up, and your performance tends to go up with that, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
All of that is leading into intrinsic motivation, which is one of the things that we promised we'd talk about.
That's right. Cool. Let's do that. So, shall we take a
Let's do
break?
that.
Okay. We'll be right back. At Harmonious Workplaces, we believe work should provide purpose, satisfaction, and growth. We empower people to thrive by fostering environments where individuals can find meaning in their work, and organizations can succeed through thoughtful, well-executed strategies. We're committed to making work better for the people who do it and the leaders who guide them. To discover how harmonious workplaces can impact your organization, visit www.harmoniousworkplaces.com and book a free 30-minute information session with one of our consultants today. Again, that's www.harmoniousworkplaces.com. And we're back. So in this episode, we've been talking about small changes, incremental changes, and building on those. And so, Ben, you want to talk about motivation?
Yeah, I think it's just one of those things that is so critical. And with all of this work that we've done around change, clarifying the why, communicating, meeting people where they are, giving them that psychological safety, making them feel like they're supported and in a room where it's safe to try things. All of these things are great, but you still have to have people who are motivated to do that change. And there's extrinsic motivation. You know, you can just give people a little bit of a bump in salary to do what you want them to do.
Sure.
That tends to work until that extrinsic motivation is removed. And then behavior often dwindles back to where it was before. And so I think that most of the literature suggests that longer term sustained change comes from intrinsic motivation. And that has to do with people's sense of themselves, their sense of identity, their sense of purpose, their sense of autonomy, and really allows for that longer term sustained change. Some of that ties into stuff that you guys were just talking about in terms of social proof or social influence, and that a little bit of that gaming, but also, you know, everyone in the company is doing it. I should be doing it too. That's part of our collective identity and my individual identity within this whole collective. So it's all kind of wrapped up into this mush, identity soup, if that makes sense. But I think that where I was going with all of that is that it's that old expression, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And so it's just seems like motivation is so important to having all of these micro changes actually stick. And that's where it comes into, is it the right micro change for this group of people at this time? So maybe making it the default for people to contribute to a retirement plan, that's pretty straightforward. That's easy. No one is really going to push back on that too much. Maybe a strong change in terms of how food is displayed in a cafeteria is felt as too paternalistic. Maybe people are going to push back at that because they're going to say, I don't want you to tell me what to eat, when to eat, how to eat. It's me, it's my body. I want to do what I want. And so that's somewhere where it doesn't necessarily meet that culture or meet the people working there at that time. And so all of these things have to be so thoughtfully woven in together and stitched together. So the micro change, just like any change, has to be done in a way that's going to resonate with that group of people at that time.
Sure. Yep.
Right. Otherwise, it can be outright rejected, right? I mean, there are people, and I'm one of them, depending on the situation, and I'm sure the two of you are too, because everybody else is doing it, you become suspicious, right? It's like, well, what is in this for me? And is this something that I should be doing? And that's why, going back to the mission, values, all of those things that no matter what size the company are so important, because if that is a company that has a certain set of values that are not congruent with your own, even physical health, and you could be working in a company that makes everybody jog at lunch. I mean, this would be a company that, like, you're either going to love or cannot survive. Right? So that buy-in is so important with the personalities that you're talking about, which leads to intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. It's a great point.
Right.
Well, there's, we've talked about some assessments in the past, right? And so there is the assessment of the strong inventory, or now it's standard SDS. It's Holland was the researcher behind this, and it basically says on a there are six different aspects that we are drawn to, right, as our work interests, right? For instance, I'm more on the social, enterprising, and artistic. Those are like my three characteristics, right? And the Bureau of Labor Statistics and ONET Online, if anybody's ever knows anything about those, they use this as a way to showcase what, or to show what somebody in a certain job is probably what their interests are, right? And it's based on those interests that they're going to have a proclivity to want to do this type of work. There's the motivation based on what their interests are, if that makes sense. So if
Yeah.
organizations can understand the individual and help them to tailor the work to the individual's interests, and tailor those goals, that people can attain, um, to those interests, that motivation to make those incremental wins, maybe they're more than try to basically, fit around peg in a round hole, rather than trying to force them to do something that's completely outside of their ken, or their what their interest.
And that's where the job of the recruiter comes in, right? I mean, it sounds like you might be talking about someone who's already at the company and you are trying to understand their motivation such that they can achieve new goals. But these recruiters, talent optimization directors and managers, right?
Hmm.
I think a lot of that pressure has been put on them before a person is even hired,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Yeah,
So there's that selection process, right? But even your internal people, I
sure.
think if you can tailor the communication, if you can tailor the what's in it for me for them, right, based on what their
Yes.
interests are. Um, if you're trying to do, for instance, in change, right, doing a tech transformation, right, we're going to
Mhm.
have some people who their interest is not in that at all, right? But can you align for them from a communication standpoint? Can you say, hey, if you adopt this part of your job gets easier, and so let's start with let's start with just let's log in. Hey, we did that. We got to. All right, we've got that one. Can you update your profile? Cool, you got that right. Oh, I'm getting the hang of this, right? And then let's go through exercise one of inputting this data, right? And then they build on that, and they can see in the context of what they're doing how it pertains to their job and their interests, right? I think you can build on that to foster some of that, that intrinsic motivation to go, okay, yeah, I see how this fits in with the company. I see how it fits in with my job, and how I can. I don't want to say fake it till you make it, because I don't really think that's the case. I really think it's helping them to see how it can also align with, to some extent, some level, their interest. If that makes sense. I said a lot of things there.
But the emphasis again is on the staff you already have. A change is coming down the pike. It doesn't have to be all at once. It can be in small increments, especially if you understand the demographics and the nature of your teams, making that change seem more appealing and doable in smaller
Yeah.
micro changes,
Hmm.
but considering their personalities so that there's a way to achieve that communication to make it more successful. Yeah,
Sure. Sure.
absolutely.
Ben, you're looking thoughtful and silent.
Are you still here?
Uh, I know we had suggested maybe we could talk about when micro changes don't work.
Oh,
In the interest of time, do we want to give that another conversation, or do you want to touch on it?
well, um, we can certainly touch on. I don't know if we're how far we're going to get on it, but I will say that like we talked about last week in or the last episode in gamification, and kind of going along with the individualization part of things. The classic industrial organizational psychology question is, or answer is, it depends, right? I guess that's also the MBA question or answer to things too, right? Is it depends. It depends on the person. It depends on the situation, right? Um, so I don't know if I mean from what the evidence shows, if you have some kind of a going to the growth mindset, Carol Dweck research, the book, if
Mhm.
you have this growth mindset of I can learn, I can get there, that type of thing. Um, I think you can build on that. If you are going to be on the more of the fixed mindset, the polar opposite of that, which is I have these talents and abilities, and this is outside of my talents and abilities, and I'm never going to learn this, and I don't want to learn how this works or do this or whatever, and so you're not going to build on those. I don't I think that is going to be problematic if you're trying to build on incremental changes.
Right. And just thinking about the example that I gave with Microsoft, if anyone listening to this actually works at Microsoft and has been put into this new cycle of journaling daily about your performance and your goals, I would love to know. Let us know. How is that going?
That would be that would be
Is
very
that
interesting.
something is that something that was welcomed, or did leadership just say, you know, we need to keep you guys more on your toes every day and not just once a year for this review? How was that interpreted? How did they communicate it? I'd like to be in there to see.
Yep.
Did it work? We don't know.
I think where I've seen micro changes be more successful is when you're using them to make small changes in relatively low stakes situations. They're good for if you have people who are a little bit hesitant or slightly resistant to a change, like you were saying before, Rich and Cheryl. It's easy to just try this one little thing. Just try it. Try to log in. Just change your profile picture, whatever it is. And so it can be very gentle ways to introduce people to something that can help. Micro changes can be good for building momentum and reinforcing those habits. You were talking before about how small habits over time become a longer sustained change. I think where I've seen micro changes not be the go-to or not somewhere I would start would be when you have a really, really toxic workplace environment or a toxic culture. Micro changes are just going to paper over, and you need someone who's going to take charge of that situation and just blow it up and say, this is not going to be tolerated anymore. We're going to do it differently from now on, and here we go. And then you can use micro changes to reinforce that and to help people live that new existence every day. But you need someone to come in and just absolutely put that line in the sand.
Right.
So it
Rapidly
I
really
shift.
comes down to the culture of the organization, is
It
what you're
it
saying.
does, and then there's also we've been talking a lot about the current situation. The markets are very very chaotic and volatile and unpredictable right now, and I think that there's a lot to be said for not opting for micro changes. That if your market is tanking, you need to act quickly, and you need to do something that maybe does not allow for slow gradual change. That it has to be done fairly quickly. And similarly, in a regulatory change, a lot of stuff that I've seen in the world of healthcare, when regulations change, governments change the way they regulate a product or a device, you have to adapt very quickly, or you're no longer going to be selling your product or
That's
device in
true.
that market. You don't have a lot of wiggle room there. So
That's
that's
true.
sort of a situation. And then the
right.
last thing I'll say is just around crises, and we can all refer back to the Tylenol example, or the BP oil spill is a favorite of mine. Is just a crisis situation, just because of how it was handled in those are situations where you have to act very quickly, and micro changes can be helpful in the sense that, yeah, we're going to try to stop this well from leaking, but it's really about all hands on deck at that point and
That makes
just
sense.
doing
Yeah.
something. Yeah.
Well, since we're going there, I want to contribute. I will say that I once was in a situation where we started using Slack, and we
Mm.
talked about this at different points on this podcast as well. That Slack was used in this case to do stand-up meetings, and stand-up meetings are stand-up meetings because they were short. Right? This is the whole idea that you could stand for them, stand
Sure.
up.
Sure.
So it took a while for everyone to make the meetings succinct to make them qualify for stand up. So we had to say, look, you get less than 5 minutes to share all of your things.
Right.
So after everyone got used to being very brief, after a while, what people started to share was not useful. So people
Mm.
just started copying things from the day before, giving empty bullet points, and not, in fact, putting thought into what they were sharing. So it worked for a minute and then it just kind of didn't. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
after people
Mm-hmm.
started doing it for the right length of time, the importance hollowed out. It did improve after that, but I mean, it went through stages where
Yeah.
it didn't.
Sure. Sure.
All
That's
right.
yeah. That's interesting. How do you sustain that as a way of being, if it causes, if there's friction, like I don't want to do this, or I haven't really bought into that, and all that, so uh, those little wins may have worked in the short term, but they may have been fatigued over time, so
Right. So for
that
micro
makes sense.
changes to work, it has to sort of build over time.
Yeah.
And once one part of it gets done, that can't go away, or the
Right.
foundation of the accumulation of micro changes will not be sustainable if the mini achievements along the way crumble. All right,
Sure.
now we've gone way over.
Sure.
I'm finished.
Not at all. We're in good shape. So, um, but with that, I think we have come to the end of this chapter, this episode. Um, what do we want to say as a closing? First of all, if you haven't seen Hermie, the HR Hermit Crab, our cartoon book, we strongly urge you to go to hermiehrhermitcrab.com and to the Harmonious Workplaces website and get your copy of that book, because we want to have that little guy in all these workplaces. Um, and if you like what you heard here and you have other ideas, please like and share and contact us, because we'd love to hear how you're building on small changes in your organization.
I
Anything else,
think you made the
folks?
right decisions there, Rich. That was all very, very good. You made all the right decisions to wrap us up.
All right, right on. Well, with that, folks, until we meet again, make change your friend. Thanks for listening to Harmonious Workplaces. You can find Harmonious Workplaces on LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, Spotify, Amazon, Apple, and other streaming platforms. We'd love any feedback on whatever channel you find us on. Please rate, like, and share our podcast with your network, and remember to add Harmonious Workplaces to your list of favorites to get notified about each new episode. To contact Rich or Cheryl, please visit www.workbalanceconsulting.com. To connect with Ben, find him on LinkedIn or visit at www.harborsidestrategy.com.